世界嘅香港，大家好！依家係星期二嘅朝頭早8點鐘香港時間，咁就係啱啱 midnight 就倫敦，就喺西岸咧。而家咧就係4:03，咁咧請嚟嘅朋友咧就都識咗好幾年啦，就係 Evan Fowler。咁 Evan 咧就係一本新書《Freedom: How We Lose It》and How We Fight Back 嘅作者，咁就另一位作者咧就係 Nathan Law 羅冠聰。How We Lose It and How We Fight Back。Evan 你好。
Oh, it's good to see you. So it's always nice to see an old friend.
Yes, indeed. And we can chit chat in both English and maybe some Cantonese. I know after you spending so many years living in Hong Kong, that's not a problem at all, right? For you?
Well, I'm half Chinese, so Cantonese is my mother language. But I'll probably respond in English because I'm more fluent in spoken English. But
and this it's broadcasted on a global basis. I guess we should have it in English predominantly.
Mm.
So the new book by Nathan Law and yourself, you are the co-author. Freedom: How We Lose It and How We Fight Back. Is it just focusing on things that happened in 2019 or from, I don't know, like during the days of the handover in 1997 and onwards?
Well, I think the book is written from the perspective of Nathan, and I think it's important to say that it's a book that we wrote together, and it's rather than sort of focusing, let's say, on more current events, it really sort of tells his own personal story, and while sort of weaving in, I think, some of the issues that have sort of shaped Hong Kong, and sadly, recent developments in Hong Kong. So we not only go back to 1997, we go quite far back, and look at the British colonial government, and make some important points, like yes, it's true that Hong Kong was never democratic, but let's not forget why it was never democratic. I mean, the colonial government. There was the very early on, there was already sort of discussions about seeing how they could sort of. Oh, so my dog has come to join us. I'll let you have a very quick look. This is Mr. Rollo.
So, hello.
It's
jumping up to the table. Hello.
That's right. It's almost as though as soon as you come to the UK. So actually, one bit of advice to anyone thinking of coming to the UK: as soon as you have a dog, life is totally different here, because suddenly people open up and they talk to you. So it's a great thing. No, right. But I think coming back to the book, it looks at Hong Kong's sort of history, and I think it tries to sort of also make the point that whilst Hong Kong was never democratic, it was still a society which certainly had the foundations of a civil society, which of course grew up later on, and it was a liberal society. It was an open society, and it was as many people have said, a free society, without the vote.
Right. What did Nathan think about writing this book? Is it after the what happened in 2019? Was it like in his drawing board for a while? This is his first English book, from my understanding, right?
It is his first English book. I mean, from what I know, Nathan contacted me early on and said, I'm thinking of writing a book, and I'd like to do this with you if you can, and that was when was that? That was sort of in late 2020, very early 2021. So I think it was like December 2020. At that stage, I think he had made the decision that he wanted to write something, but he wasn't sure what to write. So we discussed some, different ideas, whether he should, sort of tell his story or write about activism. And we ended up sort of deciding on a book which in some ways kind of weaves all of those elements together.
Right. And Nathan was in college, right? He hasn't graduated yet, right? In 2021, I don't know. I didn't follow him as closely as you do. So after the release from prison in, I guess, 2019, he left. He went to the US, right, and finished his master's. Was it during the time when he thought about writing the book?
No, it was later than that. So I actually didn't know Nathan in Hong Kong. We had many mutual friends, but I didn't meet him sort of personally when I was living in Hong Kong, and I left Hong Kong in 2018. But I did meet him actually at the end of 2018 when he joined a delegation of some mutual friends of ours. So Benny was there, Martin was there, and a few others to speak at the Cambridge Union. So I sort of joined him and sort of met him there. So we only met in 2018. By that stage, I was already in the UK, and we sort of kept a bit in touch when he was discussing the book, it was sort of late 2020, early 2021. So it was a long time after he had finished his studies in the US, and it was actually not that long after he arrived in the UK.
Okay, and before that, not too much about Nathan. About you, you were a co-founder of Hong Kong Free Press. Was it true? Yeah, I think so. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I like to sort of put it that I did get involved in sort of independent media in Hong Kong, but I'm not a journalist. I'm not someone who sort of has a passion for the media and things. It was a case that I grew up in Hong Kong. Certainly on my mother's side. I mean, there's at least 5 generations of my family in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was home, and I got concerned by I think the developments in Hong Kong. Certainly 2010 onwards. So even before 2014, I mean, I think. What I was worried about, and I have to say from the very beginning, I'm not someone. I know Nathan has sort of said, I'm an activist of sorts, but I don't see myself as an activist. I'm actually pretty mellow. I don't really like confrontation. I don't. I can't imagine sort of standing out on the streets for hours on end. But obviously, I have sympathies towards democracy. I mean, I do think ultimately there should be some accountability. Government should be held accountable to their people. Right. But I wasn't part of the pro-democracy movement. But what I felt very strongly actually was that because Hong Kong didn't have the vote, and we didn't have we didn't really have the ability to hold our government to account. The media was extra important, and as the media space started to shrink, I ended up getting involved in independent media, and Hong Kong Free Press was something which I was involved in only at the very start. So I for several years now I've not had a connection with Hong Kong Free Press.
Yeah, but it is probably the last standing independent media now, together with 獨立媒體, right? I think that's the Chinese one, because with Stand News and also Citizen News now gone, and of course Apple Daily. So on the Chinese side, it is 獨媒. English side will be Hong Kong Free Press. That's about it.
That's right, and I think it's very difficult. I mean, Hong Kong Free Press is very much Tom Grundy's baby, and I really take my hat off for the amount of drive that he has. I think just in his nature. I mean, I think he operates at 3 times the speed I do, and probably 10 times the intensity. But I think the situation now is very, very difficult. Chris Young has very correctly sort of made the point that the problem that we have at the moment is no one really knows where the lines are. It's not clear, and the lines seem to be shrinking. I think a Hong Kong Free Press has to sort of, on the one hand, keep well away from those lines, because I think Hong Kong without Hong Kong Free Press will be a much poorer place. But then at the same time, you can't restrict yourself to the point that you lose your meaning. The whole point of having media is to at least occasionally hold up a mirror to the authorities, and do so constructively. And I think that's becoming increasingly difficult as I think we've all seen it. The Hong Kong government doesn't seem to be acting like certainly the government that I knew and I grew up with. They're extremely intolerant, extremely sensitive, and it's extremely easy to cross red lines now.
Yes. And even though you say you are not really an activist of sorts, I guess the former CE, chief executive, he likes to write on Facebook. He should write on a Weibo, whatever, right? Did make some comments about you and Nathan about the book, because I think he thinks it's a good book to read. Otherwise, he won't be mentioning it a lot, really, right? Especially, he writes about Nathan Law quite a bit, almost every month, make some comments. So it must be a very important book. And also he cares about, Nathan's movements, wherever he goes. And I know he has been in activism since he relocated to the UK, right?
Yeah, I won't comment on I think on activism. I mean, even in the book, when it came to sort of really discussing activism, that was something that was very much I think Nathan is in a much better position to speak on. But I mean, what I'm aware that CY has been tweeting a bit. Find it interesting because I think anyone who knows me will know that I pretty much don't tweet. So to try and constantly trying to call me out, I mean, it seems a bit silly. And I would also remind him that he seems to have forgotten that we did actually meet. And the amusing thing was I do remember meeting him a couple of weeks before he formally ran for chief executive.
Really? Okay.
And so we CY and I have some very close mutual friends, and certainly at that time, I mean, again, as I said, I'm not someone who comes from an activist or even a strongly sort of pro-democracy background. I'm someone who merely cares about Hong Kong, and I think the reason why I've done the things I have done has been not to promote sort of democracy and things, even though that's something I would support. I mean, I think there's others who are doing that. But it's really to just sort of stand up and say, there's certain things that are happening in Hong Kong now, and even with CY, some of the things that you're saying is it's not Hong Kong. It's it's very disappointing. I mean, some of the language, the tone you're using, whether I mean, being chief executive is a very difficult job. I mean, actually, our mutual friends. I mean, I think one of the reasons why we were very briefly introduced was, because I cared a lot about also social issues in Hong Kong and poverty, and I know CY actually did. One of the good things he tried to do was to deal with poverty in Hong Kong. But what I would like to sort of point out is look how he's changed. Look how our government has changed. Look how the nature of our politics has changed. And yes, you have activists being activists, but activists always are activists. Ultimately, the tone of the politics, the tone of the discussion, is defined by those who are in power. It is defined by the government. And sadly, under CY's watch, I think the government took a very, very negative turn for the worst. Right. And maybe stop hating people so much. Stop hating Nathan so much, and actually see in Nathan, and the reason why I kept in touch with Nathan, and I consider him a friend, isn't because we agree on everything. We don't. But he's a young man who, surprisingly, is actually very open. He's a good listener. And if our government and if our authorities are so insensitive, so intolerant, that they can't even deal with a young man like Nathan, then I'm very, very concerned. And again, coming back to Hong Kong, the colonial government, for all its flaws, was a government that realized it had to listen. It had to balance a lot of different competing narratives, including within the Chinese community, between sort of pro-Beijing and the sort of pro-nationalist sections of our community. So Hong Kong, to me, was also built on an understanding of being pragmatic. But to be pragmatic, you have to listen. You have to balance competing interests. And that's not what our government does anymore. And our government now, I think, is just acting like an authoritarian dictatorship.
Now, let me disrupt a bit. The ticker symbol of sorts that you see underneath. Now, I know you read some Chinese. These are the names of the people that probably you could recognize too, like Joshua Wong, Jimmy Lai, Benny Tai, that you mentioned that you met him in the UK. Most of them are now detained. Some were on bail, but most of them are still in the detention center. Some are serving prison terms, and this could be prolonged for a long, long time. With the enactment of the national security law, there's an extreme makeover in Hong Kong, and that's why a lot of people have left Hong Kong. And the business associations have also warned the members they will be leaving soon or in the process of leaving. And with the COVID situation in Hong Kong, or using COVID as an excuse, definitely the old Hong Kong, it's kind of gone. I remember back in 2014, you and I, we were outside the Exchange Square giving some very sentimental and powerful speeches, talk about how we view of Hong Kong. That's during the time of the umbrella movement, right? But this time, as you alluded to earlier, the government has a very strong stance on what they believe in, and those who don't agree with them, they ended up being locked up in jail. Some are legislators, some are former district councillors, some are journalists. So it's kind of sad in a sense, but life still go on. And every time when I do this sort of interactive dialogue, I like to have this display, this ticker, just to remind everyone that a lot of people are locked up, and close to 800 people are still in the detention system or prison, political prisoners. The book, of course, you mentioned, and I'm not trying to leak out everything that you and Nathan work on, but is it a majority of it, is it focusing on 2019, the extradition bill, or is it the remedy to what already happened in 2019.
So the book actually it doesn't really sort of focus on 2019. It does tell the story of 2019, but really sort of the focus is looking at the I suppose institutions, the core institutions that we had in Hong Kong, which are so vital for having a free and open society. So the book, it has chapters on the rule of law, and a chapter on press freedom, and a chapter on civil society. That's right. That's the book with a very, very, very nice cover. So I think we have to thank our publishers for. So Penguin did a very good job of designing the
Penguin book. Penguin is the publisher.
Yeah. So it's Penguin's the publisher. So it's come out under Trans World, which is owned by Penguin.
Right.
But it's not. I mean, I think the feeling we had was that there were already very good books out on the events of 2014, on the events of 2019. Steve Vines has written an excellent book. Anthony Daparan, also has written, a very, very good account of I think what has happened in Hong Kong. But what we kind of felt was
the other author. I didn't realize.
And Anthony Daparan.
Anthony Daparan. Okay.
Yeah.
What's it on 2019? What happened in 2019?
So he's written a couple of books. I mean, I think his account of actually the 2014 protest.
Okay. He's Australian, right? Anthony.
Yeah. So he's an Australian lawyer, sort of based in Hong Kong.
Right.
And I think Nathan and I sort of felt, there are people who have sort of covered those bases, and they've covered those bases really quite well. But I think what Nathan could certainly bring was the perspective of someone who was really sort of at the center of what was happening. So I think being able to kind of work in two new aspects: one, his personal story, which also would personalize what has happened. So it's not just these events happen, but it's how you kind of feel these events. So one thing which I thought was very important in the book was there's in the book we sort of tell sort of a story of how when Nathan was first elected a legislator, he went into the offices, legislative offices, and as he was sort of going through into the offices, he noticed that there was a school friend who he'd grown up together, who he knew at school, who was also going through the turnstile. So he sort of noticed her, and he looked and smiled, and as one does when you see a friend. And she couldn't look at him. She couldn't even acknowledge another human being. Why? Because she was working for the DAB, and she had decided to that was that was the way to get on in life. That was the way.
Maybe it's Mankin Lun, right?
Yes, yeah. And I think for Nathan, it really sort of hit home that one of the very sad things, and I think this is one thing which does upset me. I think about the politics that you see in China. When you have a political system that only has one party, and one party that controls the truth, then not only are they intolerant of any sort of other opinion, but they demonize the other. They demonize anything that potentially challenges their authority or challenges their truth, their reality. So everything becomes extremely personal. It's not merely a case of we view things differently. In some ways, it's ironic because, of course, China at the moment is trying to portray itself as being a promoter of multilateralism, and almost as though the West is the one that's sort of imposing a particular vision. To anyone who sort of believes that, I would just say, and believes this whole thing about the West hates China. Just look at the official announcements. Not crazy people writing stuff in tabloids, but look at the language and the tone and the communication that you see coming out of UK, US diplomats, governments, and you compare that with the language that you see coming out of China. Compare the tone. The BBC has done some critical reporting on China, but compare the tone of that reporting with the tone that you see from state-controlled media in China. I think it's quite clear who is the one who seems to have the tone of hatred, and again, to me, before Hong Kong was never, we stood above that. We didn't fall into those type of games, and it's extremely sad to see. I think the nature of politics, the nature of discussion, the nature of actually the environment that existed in Hong Kong change.
I remember you were kind of upset and depressed after the umbrella movement, and now and you decided to leave like in 2018. Now you are in the UK. I guess you must have made the right decision, because a lot of people want to leave and they can't leave. And a lot of people that those who work in the media, they are arrested. No one from Hong Kong Free Press yet, but someone from Stan News, like Gwyneth Ho, Jim Lai, and all the senior executives at Apple Daily. These are people that we know, right?
Well, absolutely, and I know for a fact that actually it not only bothers me, it bothers Nathan enormously. And one thing which I think is particularly unfair. I mean, I don't have Nathan's profile, but I know, certainly there's a line of thought amongst some people that look at Nathan and say, you left Hong Kong, you kind of chickened out. I think that's deeply unfair, and he and myself. I mean, we did leave, but we're kind of haunted by the fact we left. I mean, I tell people, I have lived in the UK before, as when I was studying. Equally, I lived in Beijing when I was studying in Beijing too.
Short time, right? Just studying Mandarin.
That's right. So I was studying sort of language and culture and things, but for me, I mean, I used to tell my parents this. My mother sort of remarried, and I used to sort of tell my dad, I was like, I could never be an expatriate. I mean, I just don't know how you could leave your home. And I used to tell people, I said, well, if I was born in a little village in the UK, my nature is, I'm very attached to my home. I'm very attached to my community, and I would just happily just be the postman in the village, but just to continue being part of my community. And when I was studying in the UK, I used to come back to Hong Kong all the time. I mean, I would come back to Hong Kong to sweep my ancestors' graves, and I certainly don't say, that, I don't look down on people who choose to, let's say, look at their career and, who are much more international and much more adventurous than I. But, that is my nature. And, to leave Hong Kong, I mean, I remember when an essay I wrote for House News many years ago was actually entitled "Why I Would Never Leave Hong Kong."
Really, you wrote that article?
Yeah, and to be placed in a position where I had to consider, what was happening in Hong Kong. I had to consider, my wife and, looking forward, our family, and, the security of our family. And, frankly, whether I believed, my family would be left alone. And to have to weigh that up and have to leave your home. I think this is why I also find it so sad, that there have been many, many people from Hong Kong who, have been moving over to the UK and, have been leaving. And I always find myself really split by it, because many of them who've come to the UK I've met, and I am, I suppose, still sort of active in the Hong Konger community in the UK, though they're, again, generally sort of quietly active. But when I meet them, part of me is happy to see, friends and to see fellow Hong Kongers.
Yeah. And,
to sit there and say, why, it's great, we can open a Chan Chan Tang. Hey, the Yudan here is really crap. Let's everyone has ideas about opening up stores and things like that. But there's another side, and that is, I'm looking there and I'm saying, this friend of mine, a few years ago, he would have been the last person I would have thought who would leave Hong Kong, because the people who seem to be leaving, a lot of them are the people who were Hong Kong civil society. They were not the people who flew into Hong Kong to benefit their career. A lot of the people who left are actually the people who love Hong Kong so much that they couldn't stand to see what was happening. It's people who look at their children and say, even if I personally can bite my tongue and put up with it, I'm not sure if that's fair on my children. With the education reforms and, as we know what's happened with, let's say, some of the younger generation in China, I think it would break a lot of their hearts. And so I found it very difficult. I'm happy to see them, but I'm deeply unhappy to know why they have left.
Right. And some of the people who have not left, those who are in prison, it's sad. I know someone who knows Joshua quite well, and he is inside the prison system. And, for someone like him with his charisma and with the NSL, seems like he could be serving a long jail time. By the time he is out, he will be in his 30s. So it's pretty cruel, unless there is some sort of asylum of sorts, which is difficult, right? This is different from the case of exchanging the 2 Michaels with the CFO of Huawei. This is talking about 800 people, and over 100 is alleged to be in violation of the NSL. So it's kind of stuck right now. And for someone with faith, we prayerfully want that there could be a miracle. And some people want some sort of negotiation going on. But I still think that we have to remember those who are serving jail time, and at least they are not forgotten. So that's why a lot of people are doing different things. And there was a new book that just came out just 2 weeks ago by former director of Nix Media, Mark, not Mark Simon, but the other Mark, probably as well, right?
Oh, Clifford.
Yeah, right. And then something happened to Hong Kong Watch too. So these are like weird things that happen. The website is blocked now. You cannot get access to Hong Kong Watch website. And of course, Benedict Rogers will be having a new book that will be coming out talking about Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is not forgotten, even though a lot of people have left. And if you have not left, if Nathan Law has not left, you would not have written this book called freedom. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I would still say, it's been a couple of years now, 4 years, and every single day, I mean, the UK has been good to me. I mean, we live in a pretty part of the world, and one thing which I will certainly say is that the UK is a very mixed bag, but there are some really beautiful places, and I use the word gentle. There's parts of the UK that are very gentle, and I found that very comforting. But there isn't a day that goes past when I don't think of Hong Kong. I don't think of my family that are still there. I don't think of when will I be able to come back?
You are not on the most wanted list. Don't worry.
I know. I'm certainly aware of that. But what I find worrying. I mean, you were mentioning those who've been locked up, and actually, our book is dedicated to our friends who are in that position.
Yes.
So they do weigh on my mind. They weigh very heavily, I can tell you, on Nathan's mind. Yeah, it's there was something which Steve Vines said when he left Hong Kong. And I think this is the side of what's happened in Hong Kong where there needs to be more sort of exposition. And he said he had to leave Hong Kong because he realized that with each day and each development in Hong Kong, he was learning, or he was coming to hate Hong Kong. He was coming to hate something that he loved so dearly. So in some ways, the only way to protect, the love you had,
the memory
was to leave before the memory was so, has been so tarnished.
Yeah.
And just thinking of those who've been arrested. I mean, and again, coming back to, it's not just the arrest, it's the emotional side that I find so tragic about Hong Kong. I knew Gwyneth quite well. I knew her. I first met her when she was working with House News. I remember, sort of being in touch actually when she flew back to Hong Kong to volunteer, to sort of be a journalist on the front line. She was, she came back, she cared, and she wanted to be a witness to what was happening. And when she was arrested and when she was denied bail, I thought that was very I was unhappy about that, and I just happened to be in a conversation with actually the person who introduced us all those years ago, and I sort of mentioned that I'm and this is not commenting on the case, but this is just to say, as a human being, I find it very sad to know that someone who I know is not a bad person, who certainly doesn't deserve to be framed in the way she has, and to be in jail and to be denied bail. It's and the person who introduced us basically said, I don't want to have anything to do with you now. I don't want to communicate with you. Hong Kong had become so poisonous that even simply to stand up and say, just as a friend, I personally feel, pain in seeing a friend suffer,
Right.
And it's challenged me. It's made me look and think, there were people who, I thought were good people, who had big hearts, who, if they were in trouble, I would be there for them, because I thought, that is the best in humanity. That is what we do. And I think the type of politics that, and I've come to see in the UK with, doing research on China, that it's not just in Hong Kong. The type of politics that, sadly, especially Xi Jinping is really pushing. It's the politics of hate. It's the politics of the enemies, of seeing enemies, basically saying, every relationship has to be, I tell you a truth, and it's all about dictating and not listening. So,
well, would Xi Jinping be the emperor for life? We would know at the end of this year. But before that, lots of things are going on in Hong Kong. We don't know whether we will have like an election in May. Now it's postponed till May for the CE election. But then anything can change without warning now in Hong Kong, especially with the so-called COVID Omicron situation. They want to scare people in the sense that when every country is thinking about trying to look at Omicron as something you have to stand with, right? Is a non-issue, but Hong Kong makes it like a horror house every day. And with all the quarantine situation, doesn't look good.
Well,
especially in the UK, right? You don't need to report after the second day upon arrival. You don't have to do the PCR test anymore, and everything is kind of back to normal, right?
I mean, I'm not in a position to be able to say, what is the right approach. And to be honest, I think every single country, every single place, every single community, they face their own challenges. I remember in the UK when COVID started up, and you had sort of people who were saying, oh well, look what a great job, let's say, New Zealand has done, or things,
Right.
And you're looking there and you're sort of saying, but even when you compare the UK with Europe, I mean, the UK is a hub. The UK is by far the most interconnected part of Europe. Yes, could they have done things better? I think all countries could have done certain things better, and all countries, there were certain things they did well. But one thing that really stood out about China, though, was that it wasn't about, doing certain things well. It's you just choose to go, well, Hong Kong at the moment with Omicron, you just choose to go down a path that is not only totally different to everywhere else, and totally different to what certainly what the consensus is in the scientific community as to how best to kind of move forward on this and live with COVID. But there's also constant sort of provoking, as though if you criticize it, or if you question what's being done in Hong Kong, in some ways it's sort of unpatriotic, or you're falling into some sort of Western imperialist narrative. I mean, that it's all a bit absurd.
Okay. Now, before we run out of time, I just want to touch on one point. How can we fight back? That's one of the titles. How can we fight back? This is not a Donald Trump, the art of the deal type of fight back, but how could we reclaim Hong Kong's old glory? Does Nathan give us some hint, or is it something that is a collective thought from all Hong Kongers, whether they are inside of Hong Kong or outside of Hong Kong?
Well, I mean, I think in replying to that, I mean, I think Nathan would certainly be the one to speak on how to kind of go about, being an activist and fighting back through your activism. But what I would sort of say is that the way you fight back for Hong Kong, and also I would say for China, and pushing it back, unfortunately, pushing back against what China really now sadly has come to represent and is now trying to push out, is first of all, we have to remember what the truth is. In 2019, the protests certainly began as peaceful protests. They didn't start as riots. In 2019, there is no evidence at all for foreign interference. The protests, they came about from the community. We have to remember actually what Hong Kong was. I mean, I was reading something recently where someone was writing that, let's not forget that Hong Kong was a terribly sort of oppressed place, that oppressed and by the former colonial power, and China really sort of liberated it in 1997. Let's remember that for sure the British were not legitimately in Hong Kong, but the feeling in 1997, I think the overriding feeling was one of caution, of people were worried about what would happen next. The fear wasn't a fear of British oppression. The fear was actually how would Hong Kong fit into a communist China? How would Hong Kong fit into a very, very different system? We need to. I think we need to remember what Hong Kong was, and we need to realize the strength in our diaspora. We have to realize that Hong Kong isn't a place. It's a shared memory, a shared experience. It's a set of values. It's about being, on the one hand, and I know certain people don't like me to use this word, but it is about being Chinese. I identify as much with being Chinese and my Chinese roots as I do with my British roots. But being Chinese doesn't mean accepting the narrative of a political party. It doesn't mean blindly supporting the CCP. Being a patriot is also to constructively say, we've done certain things wrong, and let's not forget that, because let's not punish those people. Let's say who we all remember what happened in '89. Let's not just bury it and forget it. Let's come to terms with what happened. And that's dignity. That's and doing that, to me, is a patriotic Chinese thing to do.
Well, we certainly not forget what happened in 1989. That's why we have all these commemoration for over 30 years, right? Almost. And
absolutely. And to me, what we need to remember, for example, is for all of how much we dislike certain unnamed Hong Kong celebrities, let's not forget the role they played in '89 in coming out and sort of saying, no, this is wrong. And I think we need to remember. I think we need to keep that alive. I think we need to not get too depressed. You're right. After 2014, I felt very unhappy. It wasn't so much the protests. Actually, what made me feel most unhappy was I remember people very close to me sort of coming over and just sort of saying, oh well, this is all. Again, remember the line was even 2014. For Beijing, people have no agency. It has to be the US and the CIA and all of that. And people were coming over and they were sort of saying things, and simply by being not fully Chinese. I had sort of my again sort of close friends who I called uncles, who knew me since I was a baby. They came over to me and they just said. They said, well, remember, you don't belong here. Remember, you're only a guest. And I was sort of saying, well, just a reminder, but, I was born here. My family have been here longer than your family. And, I would never dream of taking away your right to identify with your home.
Well, those uncles, are they still in Hong Kong, or have they moved to another country?
Well, again, this is the great irony, and I have to say, I've also had some conversations with sort of mainland Chinese people. And I've sort of pointed out to them that, look, you're running this, one of your lines is to sort of say, oh, well, the protests, it's all because of certain Hong Kong people are, British running dogs. And I said, one of the great ironies are some of the people who were the most running dogs of the British. I mean, I remember I used to play squash with one particular guy who before 1997, he was just, I found it painful that this guy was just so sycophantic around the Brits in Hong Kong. I found him, I thought he was a bit of a strange guy. Now he's totally embraced the motherland, and he's the president of a think tank, and you can't believe it's the same sort of people. And of course, how I view it now is to say this is nothing to do with your allegiance to China. This is actually more of a reflection on who you are as a person. So I guess the other thing which I would just sort of say is, so many writers on the Soviet of the Soviet experience, have made this point too, and that is to say, we have to remember what the truth is, and we have to keep being honest with ourselves. We carry Hong Kong with us, whether you're in Hong Kong or whether you're not in Hong Kong. If Hong Kong is in your heart, then Hong Kong continues.
Okay. Now we certainly are running out of time. Can you get a hard copy of the book in Hong Kong, Freedom, or is it?
I have to say I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. I mean, we've been nominated for awards and things. So it's the reviews have been pretty good. But yes, I don't know if you can get a hard copy, but you should be able to order one online if you want to buy it and read it.
Yeah, Kindle or Google Play Store, right? Yeah, definitely you can order one.
And I definitely know quite a few people in Hong Kong who do have a hard copy.
Yeah.
So it can come in.
Yeah, maybe they can get it from one of the English bookstores like Bookazine and Swindon. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. And thank you so much, Evan, for appearing at the Etching World and Etching Live. And I hope I will see you in the UK soon, probably this year. I will make a visit sometime, hopefully before the end of the second quarter. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
Well, that would be lovely. And, please, I say this to both friends and people who I've shared memories in Hong Kong with. Always think that you have a Hong Kong home wherever I am. So I look forward to seeing you this year.
Yes, thank you. And it's very late now. I think it's already like 1 a.m. in the UK. So
okay.
Yep. Good night, Evan.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye. 好，咁就送走咗Evan Fowler 咧，之後咧再講一次啦。呢本書就叫做 Freedom。羅冠聰同埋咧 Evan Fowler 嘅作品咧，就香港我唔知個實體書買唔買到啦，但係電子書咧就一定買到。咁嚟緊咧就再講多次啦，就係喺星期五至到星期日咧，我會喺洛杉磯啦。咁之後咧，再下個禮拜1至3咧就會喺Houston Texas 德薩斯州嗰度。咁我哋會有唔同嘅聚會啦，同埋會講下香港嘅故事，亦都喺某啲嘅場合咧會係派發咧最後一期嘅蘋果日報。咁就如果你想知道呢啲活動咧，希望咧你可以透過電郵啦，你可以用電郵 contact 我 @ckchin@gmail.com。咁我哋嘅節目咧係需要咧大家嘅鼎力嘅支持，令香港可以走更加遠嘅路，喺世界度咧得到延續。咁就 呢個係我哋個 Patreon 嘅 support， 咁希望大家可以繼續踴躍咁支持我哋。咁由我哋個呼籲喺幾個月之前開始咧，到依家其實係呢一個 subscription 嘅人數咧係冇增加到，都係維持喺大約350人度。咁所以咧，希望大家係可以支持我哋，等我哋咧喺香港嘅直擊報導啦，咁同埋咧世界嘅香港嘅報導啦，可以走更加遠嘅路。最後咧4個 comment 我睇埋佢，係啦，遲啲再傾。就記住啦，即係呢個 Freedom 呢本書咧，我遲啲睇下揾唔揾到阿聰仔、阿 Nathan 傾一傾啦。咁咧，如果揾到咧，就會用廣東話做嘅。Good night。